Ocala Public Access Television. A day to remember. A day to remember.
What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock NBA. And if you told me back in the day that a band would combine Blink-182, Hatebreed, and At the Gates, and that band would end up hitting number 2 on Billboard, I would have laughed in your face because nobody would listen to that, right? But that is exactly what A Day to Remember did, quickly becoming one of the very most successful bands of the whole mid-2000s post-hardcore, metalcore kind of scene, and of course, giving us the gift that is this. Disrespect your surroundings! And in the process of all that, basically almost single-handedly taking down Victory Records with a lawsuit that left the label with a $4 million bill to the band for unpaid royalties, which pretty much put the final nail in the coffin of the label that was notorious for trying to screw their bands. So how did they do it? How did they go from a bunch of kids in a garage in Ocala, Florida, to one of the biggest bands in the scene with millions and millions of albums sold? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. But first, if you haven't, please check me out on Twitch. I'm streaming twice a week from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And there's a link to that in the description of this video. And also, it's a new year, which means new goals. And today's sponsor, Factor, is here to help you achieve yours. I've been working with these guys for quite a while now, and I genuinely think it's a great product. Personally, I care a lot about eating clean, and they make that super easy. Just choose your meals and enjoy fresh, never frozen meals delivered right to your door that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. There really is no easier way to eat well. And it's also a great way to save money. Have you noticed how expensive takeout is now? It is absolutely crazy. In my opinion, it is a total waste of money. And with Factor, not only do you save money, but your food is also ready even quicker than takeout. Personally, I really like that I can hit my macro and calorie goals without spending a bunch of time cooking, because to be honest, I kind of hate cooking. I just go downstairs, pick something out of the fridge, and I am good to go in 2 minutes. So if you want to check out Factor, and I think you should, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code PUNK60 to get 60% off your first Factor box. A Day to Remember started back in 2003 in the town of Ocala, Florida, which may seem like a cool place to you if you know it as the birthplace of a bunch of great bands like Under Oath, Seventh Star, and Wage War, but it's actually a pretty boring, kind of unremarkable small city that's also known as the horse capital of the world.
In Florida, the city of Ocala and the greater Marion County are home to more than 50,000 horses, 1,200 horse farms, and miles of horse riding trails.
And I don't know, maybe they just were bored, they didn't have anything else to do, so they very quickly got to work, releasing their first recording in 2004, which was an EP called Halos for Heroes, Dirt for the Dead. And although you can kind of hear that there is some potential, listening to it now, you know, there's nothing that would really make me think that this band was going to be anything other than yet another kind of unremarkable local band. And I think they would agree with me on that.
Yeah, holy shit, that thing sucked.
But consistency and continuous improvement is really what it's all about. So they kept putting in the work, putting out another EP in 2005, playing shows pretty much anywhere and everywhere that they could, and all that work was starting to pay off. Their former bassist Josh Woodard said that there was one particular moment where they really kind of realized that they had something. We played a 4th of July show in our hometown. The kids never responded like they did that night. They sang along to every word in our songs and everything just clicked. And based on the underground buzz that they were starting to gather, they signed with a small independent label called Indianola Records, who at the time were probably best known for putting out the band Evergreen Terrace. And in 2005, they put out their first album called And Their Name Was Treason. The only thing that's going to bother me is that you'll all call yourself my friends. And although this album was still a little bit rough around the edges, you could hear that there was something very new, fresh, and different going on here. I think that this review from back in the day, which ironically was trying to dunk on them, actually put it really well. USA's A Day to Remember are a clone of Hatebreed, Linkin Park, Blink-182, and In Flames, as shown by their 2005 debut and Their Name Was Treason. That is basically what they were, and honestly, it was awesome. There were certainly a few bands that had kind of dabbled with the idea of combining the breakdowns of hardcore with the big poppy choruses and melody of pop punk, most notably New Found Glory on their album Catalyst from 2004, but even they didn't take it nearly as far as A Day to Remember did on this album. And despite the fact that it was recorded in Andrew Wade's bedroom and that Indianola Records was a tiny label with hardly any resources, so they barely did anything to market it, based purely on the strength of A Day to Remember's grassroots following and all the touring that they had been doing, the album ended up selling almost 10,000 copies.
We put it out on our phone about a year ago on Indianola Records. Go check it out if you like what you hear.
A Day to Remember clearly had something here and their momentum was building, but they were on the verge of breaking up because they felt like they didn't have the financial resources to go where they wanted to go with the band.
We were going to break up because after that record we were like, this label isn't big enough to get us to the next level. So we have to get onto another label or there's really no point of even putting out this next record and spending like another 2 years of our lives on it, because the label was like literally going to give us like maybe $1,000.
Which is where the single best and worst thing to ever happen to this band enters the story, and that thing is Victory Records. As Josh Woodard tells the story, a friend of mine said he had the AIM screen name of someone at Victory Records. I didn't believe him, but I still started communicating with the guy. We IM'd back and forth for about 6 months. The guy asked if we'd do a showcase for Victory. We said sure, and the rest is a new beginning for A Day to Remember. And so they signed with Victory Records, and in 2007 put out their second album called For Those Who Have Heart.
So now you know exactly what it feels like.
And musically, this was by far the best thing that they had ever done, pushing that combination of emo, pop punk, and metalcore to the next level. And for the first time, they were actually getting some real promotion courtesy of the Victory Records marketing machine. Because say what you want about the label, but at that time, there was nobody on the planet better at marketing this stuff than Victory.
Mark my words, we're taking over the world.
And all of that was great, but it came at the cost of really basically doing a deal with the devil. And for some context here, let me just tell you a little bit about who Victory Records is, or should I say was. Hawthorne Heights had blown up a couple years before this with their song Ohio Is for Lovers, and their follow-up album hit number 3 on Billboard, which was just insane for like a post-hardcore / emo band from Dayton, Ohio. Unheard of. And so on the one hand, yes, Hawthorne Heights had Victory to thank for a lot of that success, but at the same time, things were definitely not cool between the band and the label, to the point where Hawthorne Heights sued Victory Records, alleging that the label owed them millions and millions of dollars in unpaid royalties. And they were not alone. Other bands like Taking Back Sunday, Atreyu, and Thursday had similar horror stories. And I don't personally know the facts about any of those allegations, but I can tell you this. I have known people in Victory bands for probably over 25 years now, and I have never heard anybody in one of those bands or anywhere else in the industry say a single good thing about that label or about the owner, Tony Brummel. Everybody says the same thing, which is that he is an untrustworthy, insane psychopath. And so my point is, the nature of Victory Records was not exactly a secret at the time. And so on the one hand, if you're a band who wanted to sign to Victory, you would say, well, nobody else can market this kind of music as well as Victory can, and we want to be part of that. On the other hand, they're also notoriously shady, so how do you balance that? And the band was aware of all of this. Here is what Jeremy McKinnon had to say about how they looked at it years later. Okay, we kind of knew getting in when we signed the contract that there was the possibility that this was going to happen one day if we ever did sell a large amount of records. Because, well, that's just what was happening to people who signed to Victory. But at the same time, nobody cared. And so they took the gamble, they made the deal with the devil, and it worked. This is the album that really established them as a legit national band. And another big breakthrough for them came later that year with their cover of Since You've Been Gone by Kelly Clarkson. And this was the peak of the punk goes pop thing, and this song was super popular, just like it was for a lot of the bands. But the reason why I think it really worked for A Day to Remember and translated into more than just like a viral success is that this song, even though everyone knew it was a cover, it didn't really sound like a cover. It really felt like one of their songs. As they put it, we think that Kelly Clarkson's song embodies what we're trying to do. We're a pop band that plays mosh music, which I think really says it all. They certainly weren't the only band at that time mixing metalcore with pop punk, or as people called it, easycore, but they did it so much better than really everybody else. And I think that song was maybe the best example yet of what they could do. And on the back of all that, the album sold over 20,000 copies in just a couple months, which was a huge success for them at this point in their career. They also played Warped Tour 2008, Bamboozle, and went out on tour with bands like Silverstein and Newfound Glory. They were blowing up. But they really hit their stride with their next album for Victory called Homesick, which came out in 2009. And this is where I became a huge fan of the band. I had heard them before, but for whatever reason, I just kind of didn't really pay attention. But a friend of mine gave me a copy of the album and he was like, you need to listen to this. I think you're going to love it. And he was right. I put it in, and as soon as I heard this, I was pretty much in love.
Let's go!
It was everything that they had tried to do on their first two albums, but better in just every way. The way they described it in an interview back then was if you mixed Celine Dion and On Broken Wings. And as crazy as that sounds, it's not really wrong. That's pretty much what it was. And once again, they took advantage of the fact that Victory actually had some money to invest in the band and went back to Andrew Wade once again to record it, and also brought in Chad Gilbert of Newfound Glory to produce, and it all paid off. In my opinion, this album is a 10. Like, it is just perfect to me. And it was also a huge commercial success for them as well. The album sold over 200,000 copies in the first year and eventually went gold. And they also had their biggest hit to date by far, which was the album's last single, If It Means a Lot to You.
Yeah, I want it, but no, I don't need it. Tell me something sweet to get me by.
Which actually to this date is still their most popular song by a good margin, and eventually went platinum. And with all that momentum behind them, expectations were very high for their next album, What Separates Me From You.
Bet they'll drop all screams and make a straight pop punk record? I wonder how much will be acoustic? They're trying to get big. They're the biggest bunch of sellouts. I heard they got rid of all the breakdowns. They know everything we have planned for this record.
Which they released in 2010 and pretty much picked up where Homesick left off. Maybe just tipping the balance a little bit more in favor of pop punk over metalcore.
This town is so what's up, and all my friends don't give a fuck.
I personally like Homesick a little bit more, but you can't deny just how fucking good these songs are. This is where it became really obvious that they had the potential to be way more than just a Warped Tour band that happened to be in the right place at the right time. The album hit number 11 on Billboard, and it seemed like the band just couldn't be stopped. But this is the part in Behind the Music where I say, but behind the scenes, there was trouble brewing. If you remember the part where I said maybe they had made a deal with the devil by signing with Victory, well, it turns out that that is exactly what they had done. And in December of 2011, A Day to Remember announced that they were suing Victory Records for breach of contract. To make a long story short, the band's claim was that Victory Records owed them hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid royalties and merch sales, and maybe most importantly, they also claimed that they had fulfilled their original 5-album deal with Victory. And the key point in this whole debate was whether they had actually delivered 5 albums to Victory or not, which would depend on whether the live albums, reissues, and EP that they did counted as albums or not. And the stakes here were very, very high. If the band won, it would mean that they were free. They had fulfilled their contract, meaning that they were free to sign to another label or release the music themselves. And if they lost, well, that means that they would be stuck for another 2 albums at least in a hostile relationship with one of the most vindictive, vengeful, spiteful labels in the scene. And to get an idea of what I'm talking about there, Victory Records' statement about the lawsuit, I think, really sets the tone. Recycled and often apocryphal stories of misguided and unsuccessful attempts by a few Victory bands to jump ship from the label that put them on the map have one common truthful thread. They always end badly for the band. can read that in your Darth Vader voice if you want to get the full effect. But with that court case hanging over their heads, they just kept working, kept touring, and even announced their next album, Common Courtesy, knowing that without a resolution to the court case, they really had no idea when or even if that album would come out at all.
Common courtesy, drying up the tears of every baby.
And after being tied up in court for almost 3 years, literally days before the album was supposed to be released, the verdict came down that they were free of their contract with the label and that Victory Records owed them $4 million in unpaid royalties.
About 3 hours ago, we were told by that same judge that we are legally allowed to release our record.
And so Common Courtesy came out in October of 2013, and with the entire scene closely following the events of this whole lawsuit, it's almost like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case of the scene, expectations for this album were incredibly high. Everybody wondered, could they actually write a good album with all this crazy stress going on around them, especially knowing that they had to fund it all themselves and that they literally recorded this thing in Jeremy's living room. And once they heard the album, the answer was clear. Fuck yes, they could.
So here I am, I'm right back at it again, just like I've always said.
The album wasn't as commercially successful as their last two because it was an independent release where they had literally a couple days to promote it before it actually came out. And so that part of it was maybe a little bit of a disappointment. But the most important part of it is that it was really, really fucking good. Personally, I would put it second only to Homesick. And with that, the band was indeed back at it again, free from Victory Records, basically terrorizing them. And they put out their next album, Bad Vibrations, in 2015, which went to number 2 on Billboard, making it their highest charting album to date.
This pain is a sickness, moving over me, I can't escape it.
And from a musical standpoint, this was their first album without any songwriting input from their founding guitarist Tom Denny, who had quit the band as a member in 2009, but kept working with them behind the scenes from a songwriting and production perspective. And personally, I really miss his input on their music. Starting with this album, which kind of goes in more of like an active rock direction, which isn't to my personal taste, but objectively, I think it's a great record. And in 2021, they put out their most recent album, You're Welcome, which pretty much just continues in that same direction. But the band's tough times were not over. That same year, their bassist Josh Woodard announced that he was leaving the band over some allegations of sexual misconduct. I personally don't know what did or didn't happen, but I do know that these kind of rumors have been going around about Josh for a long time. It also came out that he had hit someone in a car accident a few years earlier, and although there were no criminal charges in that case, it was pretty clear that having him in the band at that point was a liability, and it was time for him to leave. But with all of that behind them, the band is still going strong, with their most recent song, Miracle, dropping this year on Fueled. As for Victory Records, well, they sold the company for a little less than $30 million back in 2019. So yes, Tony got a nice payday, but I think at the end of the day, most people really just remember Victory Records as being the label that tried to screw their favorite bands. And I have no idea what's next for A Day to Remember, but they're probably only second to Bring Me the Horizon in terms of both their creative and commercial success over the past 15 years. And I would put their 3-album streak of Homesick, What Separates Me From You, and Common Courtesy against any band of their generation. So if you have never given their discography a listen, now would be a great time to change that. And I am excited to see what the next 15 years holds for A Day to Remember. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. I do giveaways every month. There are members-only channels in my Discord that I'm super active in. I post all my videos and podcasts a week early, and there's even a way to have me review your music. All you need to do is join at the $10 and up level, and then I can review your music live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone to see. So if that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.